Well, welcome back, everyone, to our podcast series for the ILSC. Just recap on the first episode that took place, which was about the ILSC's history and our mission. And we heard a little bit about the story of why the ILSC was established and the political arena at the time. And now we're moving towards having a conversation with an Indigenous leader called Pauly Vandenbergh about Indigenous enterprise and entrepreneurship, I should say, who's been quite successful in that arena. But Paulie's also a friend of mine, and he's also been successful in another world, which is really the sporting world in the AFL, and also having a career and a stint in the National Basketball League as well. So a man of many talents, I should say. But what I would say to kick this conversation off is that we've seen a growth of Indigenous innovation and entrepreneurship over a number of decades with Indigenous Australians, and in more recent times, an explosion across the country. Paulie really epitomises that journey, and we look forward to hearing from him today. So, in terms of setting the scene, I'd like to kick off by just a little short story that I have. When I was working in Northern Australia with a Indigenous leader called PDU, we came up with this concept of a culture-based economy, and that was the intersection between people, their country, and business. And that is that people shouldn't put up or put aside any one of those three things, that they can do all of these things together, and in fact develop enterprises that utilise their traditional knowledge and their connection to country and get involved in industries that would otherwise have been structurally very difficult for people to get involved in. So here I'd like to talk to Paulie about those unique challenges and the opportunities faced by Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs. And we're here to sort of explore topics such as access to capital, navigating cultural protocols, and leveraging unique cultural assets as well. So kick off, Paulie, do you want to share a little bit of your journey about your enterprises and where you've gotten to and how it all started?
Yeah, no worries, brother. It's good to see you. Thanks for the invitation. It's a bit of a strange one. I guess you always have some certain role models as you talk or just discussed about with PDU, and you have conversation with various people. For me, probably no one was really pushing sort of owning your own business when I was growing up in Ceduna, and proud Wirrungu Gulgada man from the far west coast of South Australia, and still call it home, even though I haven't been home for quite some time now living. But so I've been living on Kaurna country, Adelaide, for about 35 years now. So pretty fortunate to be here. But I think it was just I guess growing up, I had a dream and a goal of playing professional basketball, and I used basketball just to keep myself occupied. When I left Ceduna and I was with mum as a single mum, I used to play footy, used to play Aussie rules, but when I got to Adelaide, I didn't really have. I felt quite isolated, and I used basketball because I didn't need a rebound, I didn't need a second person. I could just go out and shoot and play basically basketball all day long if I wanted to, which annoyed mum. But then I started having this goal or dream of playing professional basketball, and managed to do that, and pretty grateful for those opportunities that I did get to play in the National Basketball League, and went on some amazing tournaments in China and Singapore, and went to the States a whole bunch of times as well. So I had that, and I guess from that point, I started to see the impact that sports could have with young people. And that kind of drove me to want to be in the youth space and using sports, not just basketball, but I could see the impact that Australian rules football could have in our communities with our young people. And a lot of our heroes came from AFL or NRL. In my case, was from the AFL. I was just a huge Nicky Winmar fan. I was a huge Michael Long fan, huge Gavin Wanganeen fan, and and I just saw that the impact that seeing someone that looked like me or had the same skin color as me was on the big stage. So sports became my real focus and driver, from a young age. But to play professional basketball, I felt like that opened up my eyes to a bigger world, and being around business people started to really resonate with me. And so when I joined I was at the Port Adelaide Football Club for 10 years, and now I'm at the AFL, just helping our players navigate through this world, and just trying to make their clubs a lot better and safer for our athletes. So it's an amazing role that I have at the moment, the AFL. But I think COVID, to be honest, brother, I COVID. I'll park COVID for a second, because what I managed to have a pretty unique relationship with the ILSC when I was at Port Adelaide, where we were sort of trying to build this boarding facility in Adelaide for Indigenous kids to come to basically to leave regional, remote South Australia, or anywhere, to be honest, anywhere. But at the time, it was a bit of a focus on South Australia to build a boarding facility where our kids could come and have a safe environment, and then we could sort of continue to develop them in the classroom and on the football field. So I had some amazing conversations back then with your staff, and there was a real felt like there was a real desire to sort of get some sort of boarding facility up in South Australia and sort of emulate the NCIE in Sydney and Cowboy House in Townsville, and we were seeing the impact that we were seeing in some of those boarding facilities, particularly up in Cairns as well, up there. But what had happened is during that time, sort of it was sort of we were sort of dragging our feet a little bit, and I started spending as I was spending more time with your staff. It was starting to really occur to me that there were these other opportunities, particularly in the business space, and I had this massive desire to start a company that had a focus on seafood, and that made me want to highlight my people and coastal people from the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, and I guess I was fortunate enough to be at the right place at the right time to see an opportunity in a program that you had going about sea rights and Aboriginal people exploring and sharing their Indigenous or our culture to the world. And so, that would have been about 2016. I think 2017 was when I began that journey, and became, after a long, tedious process, which was actually a really good process that we went through. We became the first Indigenous people to own tuna quota, and it was such a foreign industry for us as people from the far west coast that we often saw that industry, and I had plenty of uncles that worked in that industry, but we never had any ownership of that industry. And I think that was just a massive step for us as a family and as a community, that we actually had some sort of ownership. Now, it's not a huge quota, but it's a really massive start for us, and the aspirations from there just becomes enormous. You and I have spoken previously about growing the quota and how do you make it sustainable. But I would love nothing better than one day that we've got our own processing plant, our own boats. We've got our Aboriginal people working on our boats in the processing plants. Even taking food home to their family, and going back to what we used to eat from a seafood point of view, and that a lot of that becomes lack of access that we've had for many years. But so that's probably the journey in terms of ILSC and the tuna business. And we've had our ups and downs, and the tuna industry is quite difficult. You're sort of relying on the market a lot, but we're certainly still really excited about the opportunity that's in front of us.
Yeah. It's a great story, and I'm sure that there's more words you could say about that. But I'm just wondering if you've got any key lessons that you've learnt along the way in that journey as well, particularly with that business. I remember when I first came to the ILSC, Tim Larkin, who was working with us at the time, he was saying how wonderful this opportunity was, and it was amazing that you guys had stepped into that arena, because obviously it's been a very difficult area for people to participate in as owners, rather than as labourers, a bit like many other industries around the country. So I just wondered if you've got any specific lessons in that you could share.
Yeah, I often get a lot of younger Aboriginal people and coming up and asking for a bit of advice and stuff. And I think my biggest learning and challenge was patience. I think the patience piece was really important to wrap my head around, because I wanted it tomorrow, like many people. And so the process itself, I would say, took about 2 years. So we missed sort of 2 seasons in that process. But reflecting, I actually value the process in itself, because it just actually gave me more insight into the industry. It gave me more insight into how ILSC operates and your legislations, and working closely with my native title group was really important, and bringing them on the journey. And I sort of say that, so there was patience and bringing people on the journey. So not everyone understood it on the why, but also there was a big piece for me that I had to actually spend time with my community, because they all thought Pauly Vandenbergh owned the quota, and Pauly Vandenbergh won this whole grant, and Pauly Vandenbergh's rich. So that was the other big piece to me, is ensuring that people understood my why. I've always been about my people and my community and empowering my community, and I do want to be a business owner, and I am a business owner. We sell the tuna, and it's a joint venture with myself and the Native Title Group. But also the motivating factor was I wanted employment opportunities for my family and community. I wanted my people to have access to seafood, or more readily available seafood. And I think patience and bringing people on the journey is probably my 2 biggest learnings in this process.
You mentioned something there that pricked my ears, and that was you referred to the Native Title Group. And, I've had a fair bit to do with Native Title. Obviously, the ILSC is a child of the Native Title process. And I'm going through a claim as well that's coming up to 26 and a half years ongoing. But the key thing there is that you referred to basically communal property rights. That is the property rights that are held within a group. There's not, and you made the point that people think it's Pauly's show and Pauly's rich, but the reality is that you're trying to do this on behalf of your group. I wonder if you could just explore that a little bit more in terms of that tension, because I know it's very difficult. One thing that Indigenous people do when they get into business, when you're bringing your mob along, you've got to deal with the collective. You can't just go and do things by yourself. You can, but particularly when you're trying to rebuild the local economy in your community and those sorts of things, you really need to grapple with decades and generations of disadvantage, and people being locked out of industries and those sorts of things. I wonder if you could just reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's quite common, as you've pointed out, brother. Like when I speak to other Indigenous, I don't really call myself an entrepreneur, but other business owners, you're faced with those sorts of same challenges. And actually, I get it. I get, as you pointed out, like our people have missed out on a lot of opportunities, and various industries have made a lot of money off of us. Whether it's from our land or seas or whatever that might look like. So I wouldn't expect anything less from my family to question me. My hardest critics, even when I was playing basketball, was my family. I was used to not living up to their expectations, but I was used to, you scored 12 points in the NBL, but you should have had 18. So I was always used to that sort of feedback. And when you play sports, maybe you get used to having those honest conversations, and feedback becomes part of your daily sort of routine. And so when I went into this process. I think I understood why the questions were coming at me thick and fast. I didn't necessarily want to shy away from those conversations, but I wanted to ensure that the right people had the right information. And we've all got those particular uncles or aunties or cousins that not necessarily sit on the Native Title Committee, but have a very big influence across the community.
Yeah.
And so for me to be able to spend time with everyone, not just the Native Title community, but it was important for my cousins to understand that I actually am doing this for everyone. The quota doesn't sit with me. The quota sits with all of us. We have this quota now for life. It's a massive asset, and hopefully it gives us a head start to be able to, enter into the other areas and species. So once I started talking about the aspirations behind it, employment opportunities, we got a young nephew working on the boats now. He's in year 5 now, I think. And if you speak to the joint venture partners that we have, they'll tell you he's our best worker.
Yeah.
And I keep saying that, like our people they're workers. We can work hard. You just got to give us the opportunity. And that's the piece. Once my family and community started understanding that it was all about me trying to create opportunities, they bought into it all. So
Yeah.
I'm still not in the clear. I still have to keep feeding that information back to them, but they certainly understand the goals and aspirations of Wanama.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a very familiar story that many people who are venturing into various forms of businesses are feeling when you bring your community into the fray, and you've got to have this wide vision. And I think that's what you're talking about exactly there, and the need for resilience and ongoing commitments to the community and getting the outcome you want to get.
Yeah, and
Just turning
thick
to
skin, thick skin, brother.
thick skin, absolutely thick skin. I always joke too, because I say that I started working with my mob when I had a big head of hair, and as soon as I started working with them, that all disappeared. So there's things like that occur as well.
Absolutely. Oh,
But we got
true.
one thing we've got to have is we've got to have a sense of humour too as we go
You
through
do.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, you do.
I'm just wondering if you could share your perspective about organisations, in particular the ILSC, and how you think we could help and have helped. But if there's anything there that you think we could do a little bit better.
I think the role that I would like to do with ILSC and yourself is actually have conversations with other maybe state and federal government departments. For us, with a tuna business, it's a real challenge around, I guess, the sustainability part of it. Unfortunately, we didn't fish this year, and that's because our market at the moment is 95% in Japan, and so you're really quite restricted on opening up the markets internationally, particularly. And I feel like that's a great opportunity for us to collectively work on what does the market really look like for us. Can we open up other markets, export markets for Wanama, and also like how do we change the mindset in Australia that tuna is a really good food source and not just for cat food, you know what I mean? So domestically, we don't eat it. We eat a lot. We eat a fair bit of tuna, but not as much as you would think, you know. And so I think that market and export piece is really critical. But also, it's the other licenses that might potentially come into this place, right? Like, so if we were to sort of get a sardine license, and the sardines is what helps feed the tuna. That's when I start to think that we're actually going to be quite sustainable, and this has got a long-term future, So the start is just amazing and fantastic, but it's like, can we open up the export market? Could we help get a sardine license? Is there any other funding opportunities for not just for the license stuff, but to actually help promote, or can we can our tuna? And that's the project that I'm heading down right now, is canning the tuna and becoming the first Indigenous tuna company in a can, and then you're aware of my other business, my other wine business that I have, and I like the idea of the wine bottle because it can tell a story, and I feel like that's what we
Yeah.
could do in the can. And I think that's the big piece about many of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia that go down the business. It's all about the storytelling. It's all about culture at the heart. It's about putting their people or our people front and center. And I think that storytelling piece, I think, is something that I think we should work together on and getting that story right. And we should promote ILSC more. This
Yeah.
is we feel like sometimes it's easy to just talk about us. But I think there's a nice opportunity now to actually talk about how it all started, and it wouldn't have happened without your support.
Yeah. Was there anything particular you referred to Tim and Jacob, but you referred? Is there anything in particular that those guys as officers of ILSC helped you with? Like, was it mentoring, or was it sort of opening up
Yeah,
some broader thoughts?
def-
Or
yeah, definitely the mentoring. Both of them, and there was a Michael Davis too that
yeah,
he just understood the numbers. The numbers piece was really important to me, like the budget.
yeah,
So I think the mentoring from those three in particular was incredible. Michael was, like I said, Michael was great with the numbers. Jacob was just amazing from a strategy point of view, and Timmy actually just gave me a lot of confidence. And that was the piece. There were many times where I thought, oh, this is not going to happen. It's not going to work, or
yeah,
have I gone in too far? Am I in too deep that I'm actually out of my depth now? But they actually helped me get to the point where I felt confident. I understood the numbers, I understood the strategy, I understood the why. So those three in particular, I do want to just acknowledge because, they gave me everything that I felt needed to actually feel comfortable that this opportunity was going to work. And um, yeah, funny enough, I know they don't work there anymore, but man, I still talk to them. I had a I
yeah,
had a text message 2 weeks ago from Michael Davis saying, "Oh, how's everything going?" So you feel like we were all on this journey, and then they were invested in this whole piece as well. They wanted to see it work, and they were just
yeah.
incredible
I mean,
for me.
that's a great thing to hear. But also, I think organisations like the ILSC can walk with people on a journey rather than walk in front and drag people along, but walk with them and
Yeah,
then stay with them through the whole process.
yeah,
I think that's the really
yeah,
important point that you're making there, rather than cutting and running, which is what a lot of quite frankly, government departments do. They give you money and then they cut and run.
yeah, 100%.
So
I
we
mean, it
certainly,
speaks volumes. You know, they all haven't worked there for what 3 years, and I'm still with them.
yeah,
Like they got some real genuine interest in seeing this work properly.
that's great.
Mm.
What about your thoughts about the ILSC connecting, more broadly with Indigenous businesses? Obviously, you've got your experience, but have you got any thoughts about what the ILSC could be doing in terms of connecting businesses up, and operations like yours with others?
Yeah, I think that would be a great, like some roundtable conversations. Where um, we got some amazing businesses around the country. I would love to just hear from them on what some of their challenges are and what's working. I think that piece there is really critical. That info sharing around markets, market trends. What are the do's and the don'ts? Like, I think that'd be a great opportunity for us to all be in a room and for ILSC to be able to connect all your networks, which must be huge. I think that would be something that would be really valuable for someone like me. I still feel like um, I still am on a big learning journey, around business and business models and how you make it sustainable. So I think that would be something that would be really, really cool. And then, like if I'm going to can a tuna, is there another company that I can get my native foods from to add into the cans?
Yeah,
And who's doing that well? And that sort of connection piece would be fantastic. And I'm not I want to talk about the wine business, but I had a show two weekends ago as part of Tasting Australia with Mark Olive, so the black olive,
yeah,
and you just see like this a huge amounts of opportunity, and people want to know, like non-Aboriginal people want to know about us. They want to hear our stories, and I think that's what's resonating with the market, particularly in Australia, from a wine perspective. Is I want to elevate and give a platform to the traditional owner groups, and I think that seems to be, as I said, it seems to be really resonating. And when you bring someone in like Mark Olive with all his food and all of his experiences, and you could just see that we're only the tip of the iceberg at the moment. Like, we feel like there's still a bit of a blank canvas that we could actually start to really elevate our communities and people and our foods, and then bring in the storytelling part around our culture and talk about what 65,000 years means. And I often talk about, I've used my platforms or my companies, to one, give confidence to my people and highlight my people and stuff like that. But it also, and it also gives me an opportunity to have conversations. And I
Yeah.
talk about, those platforms that a lot of us Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander business owners have is actually, we actually want to use it as a bit of an opportunity to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And, there could be some difficult conversations in there. It could be, whether it's about changing the date or all that sort of stuff. And that's what I've used it for. But there's also an opportunity to talk about this beautiful side of our culture, the 65,000 years that people just don't realize, and people don't know, and
Yeah.
I think that's what we all do as Indigenous business owners, is to trying to change the narrative and the stereotype that often goes with our people,
Yeah. I think you've
I
you've
don't know if I
you've
answered it, but I think working together with other groups would be amazing.
yeah, I think you've naturally sort of moved on to the next area I wanted to explore anyway, which is really around that connecting up, and what you think is the future outlook for Indigenous business. And I just wonder, you mentioned your wine business as well. I mean, that's a pretty powerful way of amplifying, in a subtle way,
Yeah.
Indigenous presence and voice. I just wonder if you want to say a few things about that in terms of what you think the outlook was, and just using your wine business as an example in terms of what the appetite is for people to buy from a label that has Indigenous names and a bit of a story on it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's, like I said, I think there's a real growth here in this space for a lot of Indigenous people around Australia, whether it's food, beverages. We're seeing some really interesting beverages being made, whether it's using our native ingredients in water. I'm not just talking sort of alcohol for myself. So I think there's a lot of growth in a lot of industries at the moment in this space. Not just food and beverage and wine and all that stuff. You think about everywhere. You can see labor hire companies popping up. You see building and
Yeah,
construction companies popping up. Like, I feel like it makes me really proud if I'm driving around and I see, an Indigenous company on the road, even as you're doing the lollipops, and I just feel like I just want to give a lot of people, my people or young people, just the confidence to have a crack, you know, um,
yeah,
and start small, dream big, all that sort of stuff. Find great mentors, surround yourself with good, positive people that are in this same set or same mindset as you. I feel like Australia wants it. I feel like non-Aboriginal people in Australia want to hear our stories and want to be supportive. And so I really do feel like there's a nice movement happening right now where a lot more people are getting into or being a bit more creative and being a bit more assertive in this space. And yeah, if I can help give some of the challenges or experiences that I've had to make it work, I'd love to be involved. But yeah, I'm pretty fortunate that the tuna business is something that I've always wanted to, and it's going well. But the wine company sort of came out of left field as well, where I was sort of I was actually trying to launch the tuna business, and I wanted to partner with an Indigenous wine company, and there had been some in the past, and but it actually just made me think, well, I enjoy a nice glass of red at night and watching the footy and watching the basketball, whatever it might be.
wash that tuna
And then
down.
I started, yeah, that's right. And then I started as I started thinking about the industry, you quickly discover, which I think is a good thing as well. A lot of wine labels use our words, and I said, oh well, that's there's a good side of that in terms of, well, you're starting to see our language out, but also I kind of wondered then if did they have an actual connection with that language group or wherever they got that name from and all that sort of stuff. So the wine became a platform for me to, one, elevate the traditional owners where I pick my grapes from, and then two, I wanted to connect, as you're saying, I wanted to connect the whole industry with traditional owner groups as well, and that's just been amazing. Like it's such a cool industry, and it's really starting to take off now.
I have to say, Paul, I'm a bit jealous of that one because that's just, I reckon it's just so unique. I mean, the tuna one is too, but I think that particular one is so unique because Australians love drinking wine. And to be able to have it where people buy a bottle of wine and they look on the label and they say, Ghana country or wherever that wine's coming from, for example, and there's a little story there. I mean, that's pretty subtle education of people about a culture that's been here for so long. And I think that's, like I say, I'm a bit jealous about that one. It's such a great concept.
I'll make sure I get you enough, brother.
I just looking ahead. I mean, I think we've touched on a fair bit of your journey, and that's been very gracious of you to do that. If I could just touch on some of the topics that we've canvassed here, I think starting with community, you talked a bit about community, but you also morphed into talking about healthy food, and healthy food in many ways leads to healthy people and healthy culture. So those two things are really entwined, and it's really good to have you amplify that. You also mentioned the market, and particularly the export market opportunities. So I think there's great work to be done in that space, and that's something that I think we will certainly, if you look at our most recent releases of our sector strategies that we put out in late May, that you'll see that there is some thoughts going towards that and trying to bring people towards thinking about new opportunities. Storytelling is obviously something that's always across many Indigenous businesses, and it's such a good way of telling in a subtle way our presence, our collective presence, and our collective ability to contribute to Australia's national economy. You talked about sharing information, about having the confidence to do things, step into things that were very foreign. And I'm pretty sure that many businesses and people who step into that are very much scared about stepping into those spaces that they're not used to. And I think that's a really important point that you've raised. And you also talked about mentorship as well as being a very critical ingredient to, the support and getting you to have the confidence to be able to move forward with your business ventures. So they're sort of the key takeaways. Is there anything else that you think you want to highlight or amplify before we start wrapping up this podcast?
I guess I just always encourage, whether it's corporate Australia or government, to buy from us, not just like I'm talking me, I'm talking everyone. Invest in us, help share some of our stories, help change the narrative, and to that piece around when you're eating or whenever you're drinking. In my case, when you're drinking wine, it usually comes with conversations, and I think for me personally, those conversations are really critical to our future in Australia, and like I said, changing a bit of the narrative about who we are. And so, I just want people to just, corporate Australia, government, all that sort of stuff, to continue buying from us, investing us, giving us the support that we kind of need. We do operate differently, but we're all very community minded, and I guess for the mob out there, I just want everyone to have that belief that they can do something and create something that lasts, not just for the profits, but for your legacy and for the old people that came before us, and try and elevate, my Wirrungu Google people as much as possible. And I always reflect on my mother and my grandfather who had, difficult upbringings and stuff, but they're the reason why I'm here today and having these sorts of opportunities. And so that legacy piece becomes really important, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah. All right, Pauly. Well, thanks for that. The next podcast is going to be around renewable energy. We're going to hear from someone who's been leading in that space, and that really is very important in the context of our political standing here in Australia. You mentioned Australia made. Well, I mean, having Australian made by first Australians clean energy into our national systems is something that I think a lot of people have taken an interest in. So we're looking forward to hearing from Karina Nolan about that experience, and following on from your great experience here too, Pauly. I want to thank you. Thank you for joining us on this podcast, but also for your time and sharing your lessons and your intellectual learnings and stuff. And so thank you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate the time. Thank you so much.